ことみ様。
ダメですよ。
Hey Akari, looks like the show's about to start.
興味ないからパス。
Could you make me some popcorn while you're there?
自分で作れ。
I wonder if you can eat this straight from the bag. Thank you, thank you. It is my great pleasure to welcome all. All 2,000 of you? Wait, what? Where did you all come from?
なんか今年しょぼくない？
Where do you think my animation budget is going?
てへ。
Anyway, you guys know the drill. It's that time of the year when I randomly make a tier list in which I rank every single VN I've played during the year. If you are new to the channel, I should probably tell you that I kind of play whatever I feel like. So this list isn't exactly a representation of the current year of visual novels. Also, most of these titles are games I've already covered on the channel. So if I don't dwell too long on some of these, it's probably because I've already done so extensively in their respective videos. On the other hand, if you're a long-time viewer, rest assured that there's also some stuff I haven't covered, either for time constraints or lack of things to say about them. Nevertheless, I don't want to waste your time any longer. So let's dive in with our first title.
群青の空を越えて。
When I think about it, I feel like Gunjou no Sora o Koete is basically the opposite of the stuff I usually play. It's extremely dry, has no humor, and the characters themselves aren't written to be likable. But you know what? I think getting out of your comfort zone every once in a while can lead to very interesting discoveries. What left the biggest impression on me was the sheer scope and ambition its setting had. It's ridiculously complex and well thought out, yet at the same time, it's handled in a way that never overshadows the main cast. This is a story that portrays war in a very personal manner, leaning more heavily on personal beliefs and goals rather than grandiose battles and skirmishes. I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert in military-themed VNs, not that there are that many to begin with, but I just can't see this one ever being topped. I'm going to put this one on the A tier.
雫。
Yes, Shizuku. I had actually played this before, but this year I went through it a second time with a group of friends. If you're a long-time viewer, you might remember that I included this one in my visual novels that are easy to read in Japanese that don't suck. Well, I guess I should make a public apology, because this game kind of sucks. Okay, maybe that's a bit too harsh. The game isn't exactly terrible, but it sure is terribly repetitive. Like if you took away the scenes that are repeated through routes and the many pointless H scenes, you'd probably end up with a game that's a fraction of its total playtime. In a vacuum, the story, or more accurately, Ruroko's route itself, is perfectly serviceable, and Sayori is quite cute. But my god, I seriously have no idea who Mizuho is intended to appeal to. She's basically what would happen if you turned Milhouse from The Simpsons into an anime girl. All in all, if you're good at speed reading, the game is all right. I still stand by what I said about its difficulty. But unless you're interested in its historical context regarding Denpa VNs, I really can't see myself recommending this one. It goes into the D tier.
ナースストーリー。
Nurse Story isn't great, but I honestly can't bring myself to hate it too much. It's a pretty charming and completely forgotten dating sim whose main sin is its total lack of gameplay depth. Sure, it's not like dating sims or esports tier of gameplay intensity, barring that Tokimeki arcade puzzler, I guess. In Nurse Story, though, there are simply not enough things you can do here other than aimlessly walking around the hospital, which would be fine if playthroughs were shorter or the game had more variety in its events. For example, every in-game day begins with a nurse coming to your room for your daily checkup. They could have added a lot of variation here, but all the nurses do is just check your pulse. I guess they are checking if you've died from boredom. Still, I like the cast well enough, and the actual endings had more story than other dating sims, but it's simply not a very fun game to play. This one also goes into the D tier.
この青空に約束を。
I'm not really the type of visual novel reader that likes to replay stuff, but this game, man, there's something so engrossing about this game's story, cast, and atmosphere that it just immediately Kirby Air Ride absorbs me.
いつもよりひどいじゃん。
Anyway, I'm not a big fan of the expression, to be better than the sum of its parts, mostly because video game journalists use it so much that it has lost nearly all of its meaning, but I feel that this is a title where it actually applies. If you dissect its elements individually, there's really nothing particularly remarkable about them. But once you put them together, everything clicks wonderfully, mainly thanks to the game's impeccable direction. To me, this is one of those titles that is aged like fine wine, and I can definitely see myself revisiting it plenty of times in the future. This bad boy is going straight to the A tier, baby.
この青空に約束をリファイン。
Yep, I'm splitting these two entries. I was told that I was perhaps a bit too lenient with the 5 out of 10 score I gave this remake, but the truth is that for all of its misgivings, Refine is not a terrible remake, just a very lazy one. The main issue is that they decided to reuse the censored PlayStation 2 All Ages script, which already existed prior to the remake itself. The rest of its problems are just a conglomeration of poor choices, such as forgetting to include the majority of background visual effects, not including the extra tracks from the PSP version, haphazardly drawing on top of the original CGs instead of making them from scratch, etc. It's an inferior version no matter how you look at it, but I feel like if they had at least kept the original script, it would have simply been a slightly underwhelming way of re-experiencing the game. But since that wasn't the case, you're going right into the D tier club, and you aren't allowed out of there until you properly refine yourself, mister.
キャンディーガール。
One of the things that I like about doing end-of-the-year tier lists is that I get to remember stuff that I forgot I had even played. Candy Girls is this year's, oh right, I played that thing VN. I think my mind just wanted to block it out. Okay, while I like to poke fun at this title, I actually respect what it was going for. There's novelty in its premise, and it's at least executed with sincerity and earnestness. This could have just as easily been purely a gimmick VN, and in an era where so many Western developers use the VN medium as the butt of the joke, I feel like something like Candy Girl deserves some appreciation. To be honest, it's not like it's particularly great or anything, but as a one-of-a-kind type of novelty, you could most definitely do much worse. This one goes into the C for Candy Girl tier. Also, did I mention that the games folder includes around 400 extra pictures of the dolls?
いや、削除しろ、それ。極光のマリアージュ。
As far as revenge-driven plots go, I think Kyokkou no Marriage is a fairly well-executed one. The mystery and its foreshadowing work, the characters are well-written, and it's a story that doesn't overstay its welcome. It's good, but at the same time, I don't have any strong feelings towards it, for better or worse. I think that it needed a bit more impact in its route climaxes, but more importantly, a stronger sense of world building. Generally speaking, with anime-adjacent media, especially of the fantasy genre, the story needs to do a damn good job at selling you its setting, otherwise I find it hard to get invested in it, with all the multicolored haired blokes and gals and their often ludicrous designs. Just to be clear, I do like me some good old fan service outfits, but when the narrative foundation isn't there, I can't shake the feeling of watching a bunch of cosplayers doing a stage play. Then again, I don't want to sound too negative on this game. I still think it's enjoyable and worth reading, but I guess the quality of the plot made me wish for a bit more ambition in that regard. Regardless, this one goes into the B tier.
メモリーズオフ。そうそう。
Even as a fan of the series, I can't deny that the Memories Off games have certainly had their ups and downs, and the disappointingly bland, supposed reboot of the series made me rather wary of its potential future. However, So turned out to be a fairly decent entry, in my opinion. It admittedly made some questionable decisions, sure, but I'd rather see the series take some risks than fall into stagnancy. The character writing was surprisingly good, and the routes had a decent amount of variety. I don't think it quite reached the same highs as the series' peaks, but I enjoyed it for what it was. I'm genuinely curious whether this one will get translated as well, seeing that Shin Memo wasn't exactly a hit sales-wise. Like seriously, P-Cube, you guys translated the wrong one. I swear this one won't sell like ass. Whatever the case, Memories Off So, you're going to the B tier.
ハイタッチ。
Last year I was positively surprised by Mabisoft's Yugaken, as it went beyond being a basic nukigi and actually tried to have a little bit of plot in between the comedy and fan service. I was kind of hoping for Pi Touch to be the same, But this one was a far more straightforward nukige. The plot is that the protagonist mistakenly takes away the powers of a goddess that fulfills the wishes of women regarding a certain part of their bodies. So in order to give it back, she tasks him with fulfilling those wishes himself, which he can only do by directly touching that certain part of their bodies. It's just as dumb as it sounds. Luckily for Pi Touch, I like dumb stuff, so I thought it was fine, if a bit generic. The only reason I'm bringing this one up is that it features a surprisingly well-animated touching minigame, which I'm absolutely not going to show here, and also not one but two Miku parody characters, and you can never have too many Miku parody characters in a VN. Anyways, not much else to say about this one. C tier.
Cation.
Now here comes a potentially hot take. What if I told you that this pretty nice looking game was actually the worst visual novel I read this year? Yes, even worse than the Cursed Doll visual novel. Let's get the positives out of the way first. The art is nice, and on the gameplay front, raising your dating sim stats makes you quote-unquote perform better during the H scenes, reflected by the expressions of the girls as well as the amount of love you spurt out, which I thought was a very funny implementation of dating sim mechanics. But that's where my praise ends. The premise itself isn't even worth bringing up. Your uncle wants you to either get a GF or find a job, or else he'll kick you out of your flat. That's it. You're then thrown into the most pathetic excuse for a dating sim I've ever seen. All you do is pick the place where the girl is hanging out. You see a short, usually completely pointless scene. Repeat, the routes themselves aren't that much better, since once the confession scene is done, the game just turns into an extremely vanilla and boring nukige. I honestly dreaded every time a date scene came up and could physically feel my brain cells being erased from existence as I slogged my way through them. They also tried to add a bit of drama to these routes, but it always appeared around the last scene of the route and often lasted less than 10 minutes. At which point, why even bother? You know what? I'm just going to straight up spoil one of these routes, specifically Yumi's route, to get my point across. Feel free to jump to the next entry if you don't want to be spoiled. The placing itself on the tier list shouldn't be much of a surprise, down at the very bottom of the D tier. Anyhow, Yumi's route follows the "let's pretend to be a couple, oh no, we actually fell in love" type of premise, which is honestly a type of route I usually quite enjoy. Not this time around though. At one point, the protagonist gets anxious about his feelings and how Yumi isn't properly reciprocating them, so he takes the most reasonable course of action and proceeds to fruit emoji Yumi. Oh, but it gets worse. Do you know how in some games during the H scenes you get the outside or inside choice? Well, in this particular scene, if you pick inside, that's a bad ending, which, sure, fair enough. But pick outside, and not only is it all forgiven, but the game suddenly pretends that it's actually the protagonist who was the victim all along due to Yumi's vague stance on their relationship. Like what? And I usually don't mind VNs having questionable content, but when there's such a jarring tone gap between what the game is aiming for and what it's actually delivering, not even I can bring myself to defend it. Also, I read a comment on EGS comparing this game's dating sim parts with Tokimeki for some reason. I seriously wonder if that dude had even played it. Fortunately, I have.
Tokimeki Memorial.
I'm honestly a bit conflicted regarding Tokimeki and this remake. At first, I wasn't fully sold on the new art style, but it kind of grew on me. I feel like it at least tried to recreate the original art style with a slightly more modern look, though I personally decided to play the game with it, mostly because otherwise I'd feel like I paid for something I could just as easily emulate. One aspect that I think is very neat is the use of, I'm guessing, AI to create all sorts of voice clips for whatever name you want to go with. You can make the girls say plenty of silly things.
Merry Christmas, kun. それじゃ、帰ろうぜ。Happy New Year.
あ、前に
Shori, no! You can't say that word on YouTube. Anyway, as for the game itself, I'm kind of torn. Mechanically speaking, I think the game's systems were a stroke of pure genius. It's such an elegant way to represent the day-to-day life of a high schooler. However, if you judge it the same way you would a regular visual novel, it somewhat falls apart. There's zero character depth, events are extremely short and basic, and there's simply no trace of a plot whatsoever. I get that this is a game whose main aim is to offer you a sandbox to create your own story, but once the repetitiveness kicks in, there's essentially no incentive to keep going. I still thought it was kind of neat, and this remake is probably the best way to experience it, but personally, it didn't go beyond being just a curiosity. As such, I can't rank it any higher than a C tier.
エレクト
I know what you're thinking. This dude picked this one up just because of its funny name. And yeah, I absolutely did. The premise of this one is that there's a school for succubi and incubi, which a daughter of a royal family attends. She's, however, struggling with her overly strong magical powers, and the only way to keep them under control is by doing you-know-what. But since she worries that she will mummify any possible partner, she refrains from doing so. I probably don't need to mention this, but obviously it turns out that the protagonist is the only one who can endure it. So he makes the noble sacrifice, and for convenience's sake, also begins attending the school. It's a fairly standard Nukige-ish premise for a game with a Nukige-ish title, but against all odds, this game is in reality just a regular moj. I guess one could see this coming after realizing who's the artist behind it. In case you don't recognize it, it's Piramizu, the same artist who's now better known for the Amakano series. Personally, I think his CGs look absolutely great, but I've always found his sprites to be a bit iffy, even in his most recent works. But that's just personal taste. At any rate, the game itself is kind of okay, but it has one critical flaw. You see, for some inexplicable reason, they thought it would be a good idea to make not one, not two, not three, but all four main heroines bashful around all ecchi stuff. Yep, they made all four succubi heroines shy about dealing with the stuff succubi are known for. Like, what are we even doing here? I could see if they made one of them like this, as it's an amusing enough contradictory personality trait. But at this point, you're essentially throwing away your entire premise down the drain for no good reason. I find it frustrating because the game occasionally alludes to the unique culture of succubi and how their common sense is fundamentally different, but you can barely sense that in their behavior. However, there's this one single side character, Eris, who basically saves this game from being utterly mediocre. I've never seen a girl single-handedly carry a game this hard. She is sort of presented as a comic relief character, but to me, that's precisely how everyone else should have been. Fortunately, she does get her own route, albeit a shorter one, which unlocks after clearing any other route. And would you know it? It's by far the best route in the whole game. Still, even with Eris's efforts, I don't think I can rank this one any higher than a C.
Dear my friend,
Looking back on the stuff I read this year, I feel like there were quite a few titles with questionable decisions that left me scratching my head. However, Dear My Friend, on the other hand, is a title which took decisions that I simply don't agree with. I'm prefacing it this way since I believe that there was at least an attempt to create something unique and distinctive. The problem is that most of those attempts just don't work, or at least are greatly undermined by a somewhat aimless direction. Out of all the VNs I've played this year, this one is probably the title with the greatest potential to be extremely divisive, because it did have some brief moments where it truly shined. You kind of need to dig deep to get there, but at the same time, if you need to dig an entire cave to reach those bright moments, you might as well head back to the exit you came from. Does this analogy even make sense? Anyway, Dear My Friend, you are going to the C tier.
Memories of After Rain.
I will admit that fan discs aren't really my thing, as I usually find them rather bland or more often than not quite pointless. But since Mages decided to release the Memories Off Fan Disc Historia collection, I thought I might as well check out one or two of them, and After Rain was the one I picked. This one is meant to be like a double fan disc that crosses over characters from the first and second entries. It was originally released as 3 separate volumes, so the whole thing is surprisingly meaty in terms of content. I would love to say that that is a good thing, but I'm going to be honest. This one isn't that great, my dudes. In fact, it's kind of a bizarre fan disc. So you know how in a typical fan disc, the MC and the heroine face some minor hardship, only to come out on top in the end? Well, After Rain kind of does this, except that you can dump the girl, cheat on her, and end up with someone else. I mean, if this was an NTR erigi, this would just be the standard etiquette. But for an all-ages fan disc that's supposedly taking place after the original game's true ending, this feels really out of place. I also wasn't a fan of how the conflict was essentially the same as it was in the original titles. It just felt like the game deleted all the progress made by the characters for the sake of telling the same story. And then it does it a second time for the third volume, just to keep things going. That being said, I did get some entertainment value out of the interactions between the two casts, but unless you're a massive fan of the series, I really don't think this one is worth playing. It goes into the C tier.
Hanachirutani Sanjinkou.
Oh boy, this is one I desperately wanted to enjoy a lot more than I did. The writing is amazing, as expected from Murani, the greatest Eroge writing of all time. And no, you can't change my opinion. And the moments when the story goes hard, it really delivers some incredibly emotional punches. But man, that protagonist... I remember back when I played Kagero Toryuki, how surprisingly memorable were the moments where the protagonist self-reflected on his situation and his state of mind. It was one of my favorite aspects of the game, and while Hanachirutani Sanjinkou also does this quite often, it just feels like most of the time you are just reading different ways of saying how pissed off the dude is. Yet despite this, the whole narrative has an undeniable sense of cohesion and a clear artistic vision. It's the type of VN that gives full priority to its themes, and while it absolutely pays off, it also makes the experience quite tough to get through. I'm going to put this in the B tier, but I can easily see it sitting comfortably in an A tier if its themes resonate more with you than they did with me.
Tensai Shoujo wa Juuryokujou de Odoru.
Okay, so this is a bit of a cheat entry, since in reality, it's not exactly a visual novel, but rather an actual proper physical novel. It was, however, written by Ono Wasabi, who some of you might know as the scenario writer of Hakuchumu no Aogashin. It's actually quite common for VN writers to do stuff outside the medium, which, if anything, I think it gives more legitimacy to the medium as a whole. At any rate, the plot of this one goes as follows. The protagonist is a university student who, in order to complete his university credits, joins a small 3-member research laboratory as a helper. However, one of the members, a young prodigy girl, is strongly against the notion, as the group is about to carry out an experiment involving a time machine that she wishes to keep as an utmost secret. In the end, she concedes, but when the protagonist checks the machine for himself, it gives him a message saying that if he doesn't fall in love with the young genius in question, the world will end. As a hook, I thought the premise worked perfectly fine, but I was a bit disappointed once I found out that the sci-fi elements take a backseat to the romance. As a character, she was well written enough, but their relationship kind of felt like it happened simply because it needed to happen for the sake of the plot. In general, it's a very lightweight read, and these are not my words, but his. I did have a decent time, but at the same time, if I had never heard of him or Laplacian and picked this book on a whim, I'm not sure I would go out of my way to read more from him, which is kind of a shame since I know he can craft far more interesting stories than this. Still, not terrible by any means. A high C tier, almost a B tier.
Shinsetsu Ryouki no Ori.
Funnily enough, Shinsetsu Ryouki no Ori is probably the best remake I played this year, at least if you judge it based on the quality of work put into the remake itself. As for the actual game, it was also quite enjoyable, even if some parts felt a bit dated. I'm mostly referring to the gameplay portions, as they're unnecessarily cryptic in terms of what you need to do and where you need to be. Still, the isometric view kind of gave these portions a Hotel Habbo vibe that I quite dug. The main story too is quite entertaining, though perhaps not entertaining enough to go through it like 10 times to get all the endings. That said, if you play this with a guide and only clear the endings of the girls you find interesting, I think it can be a pretty solid experience. B tier.
Ikinari Happy Bell.
Ikinari Happy Bell is a quite flawed visual novel, and at the same time, one that I really admire for its boldness. Some of its lows are honestly quite miserable, but its highs are shockingly good. Most importantly, it's a VN that isn't afraid to make some ballsy moves that wouldn't fly in this day and age. I think it's the definition of a product of its age, and I kind of mean this in a good way. That said, one aspect that I don't think has aged a single second is its absolutely gorgeous, vibrant art style. To me, it screams forgotten 90s OVA you randomly found on a VHS at a thrift store, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Actually, 90s OVA is a pretty good way of describing the game as a whole. Far from perfect, but its sheer charm makes you overlook a lot of its shortcomings. Also, Princess Patat's wild ride of a route is quite something. At any rate, I'm putting this one on the B tier.
Maoten.
Maoten was probably the surprise of the year for me. This isn't actually the first time I tried playing it, but I always ended up dropping it due to its seriously boring first hours, though this was the one time I decided to stick around, which definitely was the right choice. I feel like it's one of those titles that gets better the more time you spend with. And no, this isn't Stockholm Syndrome talking. Don't you dare give me that, it gets good 50 hours in GIF. Anyway, as I said, I quite enjoyed my time with Maoten. The comedy was consistently funny, the characters had good chemistry between them, and the game hit a surprisingly good plot behind all the silly shenanigans. It's a solid A-tier visual novel in my books. Now let me ask you this question. If you were to name the strongest characters in a visual novel, which characters pop to mind first? Shiki from Tsukihime? The Kageaki in Muramasa combo? Perhaps Rance? How foolish, I say. You've yet to see the most terrifyingly powerful entity in this medium. Behold the button holding the Tomefure girls' shirts.
Deka.
Seriously, if that thing were to pop, it could seriously injure someone. Anyway, coming in at the last second, this is the final VN I finished this year. Looking at this footage, you might think that this is yet another generic Nukiji, but in a massive twist of fate, it isn't. I mean, I also went in expecting some good Nukige Garbo, but it's actually a pretty funny rom-com. The plot goes that the protagonist creates an account on an online platform to meet girls. However, the purpose of this platform isn't to go on dates or hook up, but rather to offer girls who have run away from home a place to spend the night. The thing is that any sort of indecent activity between the two is strictly prohibited, so obviously when the first girl, who happens to be his classmate, shows up, it becomes a battle of wits with him trying every trick he can to sleep with her and her doing everything she can to steer clear of the situation. At this point, it suddenly dawned on me. Battle of wits between a boy and a girl with a loud narrator running commentary on the situation? This game is a Kaguya-sama, Love is War, Era J parody, and it's not a particularly bad one either. The way I would describe it is that the girls have become self-aware of their own designs and are trying their best to avoid the story turning into a full Nukige. To put it into perspective, it takes a serious while before the first actual H scene ever shows up. Probably longer than your average Moj or plot-focused VN. If you're into teasing and, I guess, quote-unquote romantic build-up, this game will be up your alley. And once it enters the Nukige territory, it just steamrolls you with H scene after H scene. It's hilariously relentless. I do feel, however, that around the middle point of the story, it kind of drags things out and is just pointlessly postponing the inevitable. But other than that, it's a pretty fun title. This one goes high into the B tier, shockingly enough. And with those out of the way, it's time to reveal this year's best VN that I played. But before that, I gotta get my guitar real quick. Not sure why I'm doing this, but oh well, here goes nothing. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, hey! Yeah, no surprises here. 2025 VN of the year for me was Seidaguchi's Black Sheep Town. Impeccable world building, extremely complex characters, intricate and deeply interconnected plot threads, held by a remarkable sense of structure. I could really go on. In fact, I will. The themes are greatly explored. The narrative tone is consistently dark and moody without ever falling on the unnecessary edgy side. Even the most minor characters are perfectly fleshed out. Honestly, it's pretty hard to discuss great VNs like this, since most of what I can say is, yep, this is great, and this other thing is great too, and let's not forget about this other great thing. The only thing I can point out as not ideal are some aspects of its presentation, but I can hardly blame the game considering its doujin nature. It's simply an incredibly ambitious work that pulled off an unconventional story shockingly well. You do kind of need to be in the right mood for it, but if you are, you're most certainly in for a treat. And that wraps up this 2025 yearly tier list. As usual, I'm going to leave it in the background for you to look at. All in all, a bit of an uneven year, if I'm being honest. Stuff that I thought I wasn't going to enjoy, like Gunjou, no Sora, Koete, or Maoten, I ended up quite liking. While other titles like Dear My Friend or Hanachirutani Sanjinkou, that I was quite convinced that I was going to love, I ended up with mixed feelings. Still, I wouldn't say any of these dropped the ball or anything, and I'm still glad I checked them out. Whatever the case, I'm going to end the video here. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time. Marin out.